The plasma bolt missed Commander Jake Morrison's head by 3 inches, scorching the bulkhead behind him. He rolled left, bringing his rifle up as the Velcros warrior charged through the smoke. One shot, center mass. The alien dropped, its purple blood pooling on the deck of what used to be a civilian transport ship. 30 seconds earlier, this vessel had been carrying 200 human colonists home from the frontier world of New Haven. Now it was a floating graveyard, and Jake was the only thing standing between the survivors huddled in the cargo bay and a pack of raiders who didn't know mercy.
"How many?" Lieutenant Amy Chen's voice crackled through his earpiece.
4 down, unknown remaining, Jake replied, ejecting his spent magazine. They're boxing us in. The Velcros had made a critical mistake. They boarded a ship that happened to have a Marine fire team on board, rotating back from patrol duty. What should have been an easy raid on defenseless civilians had turned into a bloodbath. But the raiders had numbers, and they were getting desperate. Jake heard the screaming before he saw the flames. Section C. The bastards had set the life support deck on fire. He sprinted through the corridor, his boots pounding against metal, each step measuring the seconds slipping away. Smoke filled his lungs as he burst through the hatch. 3 Velcros stood with their backs to him, pulse throwers aimed at a sealed door. Behind that door, 17 people were trapped, and the fire was spreading fast. Jake didn't hesitate. His training took over. Muscle memory from 1,000 drills. 3 targets, 3 shots, 3 bodies hitting the floor before they even knew death had arrived. He wrenched the door open. Families poured out, coughing and crying, parents clutching children. An old man grabbed his arm, eyes wide with terror and gratitude. Jake pushed them toward the escape pods, counting heads, calculating time. The fire was consuming oxygen faster than the damaged systems could replace it. "All teams converge on Pod Bay Delta," he ordered. "We're abandoning ship in 2 minutes." Amy's voice came back sharp. "Negative. We've got civilians pinned down in medical. The raiders are using them as shields." Jake's jaw clenched. The Velcros Confederation had been pushing into human space for months, testing boundaries, probing defenses. They'd destroyed mining outposts, stolen cargo, killed crews. Each time, Earth's government had filed diplomatic protests. Each time, the Velcros had ignored them. This was different. This was a passenger liner. These were families. "I'm on my way," Jake said, changing direction. He reloaded as he ran, checking his remaining ammunition. 12 shots left. It would have to be enough. The medical bay was chaos. Through the viewport, he could see Amy and her team pinned behind overturned gurneys. 5 Velcros warriors held position near the medical pods, their weapons trained on huddled civilians. The aliens were chittering in their clicking language, probably calling for extraction. They wouldn't get it. Jake keyed his comm to the ship's emergency channel, the one that broadcast to every vessel within range. He wanted witnesses for what came next. "This is Commander Jake Morrison, Earth Colonial Marines. To any ship receiving this transmission, the civilian transport vessel Horizon's Light has been boarded by Velcros raiders. They are executing non-combatants. They have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed." He primed a flashbang, counted to 3, and threw it through the medical bay door. The explosion of light and sound sent the Velcros reeling. Jake moved through the entry like liquid violence, each shot precise and final. When the smoke cleared, 5 more aliens lay dead. The civilians were safe, but Jake knew this was just beginning. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you made humanity choose between peace and survival. They were about to discover that the patient, diplomatic humans who had absorbed insults and provocations for years had limits, and those limits had teeth. The distress beacon activated automatically, sending Jake's message across the network. Within hours, it would reach Earth. Within days, the government would respond. The Velcros Confederation thought they understood humans. They thought patience meant weakness. They thought restraint was cowardice. They were wrong on all counts, and their education was about to begin in fire and fury. Admiral Patricia Hayes stood in the war room beneath Geneva, watching the holographic display flicker with red warning markers. Each one represented a human settlement under threat. Each one was a countdown to chaos. "The Senate is demanding immediate action," General Victor Kane said, his weathered face grim. "3 colony ships hit in 2 weeks. The public is calling for blood." Patricia knew the pressure. She'd felt it building for months as the Velcros pushed deeper into human territory. But war wasn't something you rushed into. Not when the enemy controlled 6-star systems and had allies in the Chromath Empire. Still, Jake Morrison's message had changed everything. Footage of dead children spread across the networks. Families executed while begging for mercy. The galaxy had seen humanity's restraint. Now they would see its wrath. "Fleet status," she ordered. 7th and 9th Fleets are at full combat readiness, Kane replied. 42 destroyers, 18 cruisers, 6 carriers. We can have boots on the ground in Velcro space within 72 hours. "Intelligence on their defensive positions?" A new voice entered the conversation. Commander Lisa Park from Naval Intelligence stepped forward, her tablet glowing with tactical data. "The Velcros have fortified 3 primary systems, their shipyards at Velcros Prime, their fuel depot at Krenthos, and their forward operating base at Zeta Persei. They're expecting retaliation, but their intel suggests they think we'll negotiate first." Patricia almost smiled. Almost. "They think we're predictable." "They think we're soft," Kane corrected. "Every conflict humanity's had with alien species has ended in treaties and compromises. They've studied our history. They know we prefer diplomacy." "Preferences change," Patricia said coldly. She pulled up the casualty reports from the Horizon's Light. 217 civilians. 83 of them children under 12. The Velcros had executed them systematically, recording the deaths as warnings to other human settlements. They'd broadcast the footage across their networks as proof of their dominance. They'd made a fundamental miscalculation about human nature. "Assemble the fleet commanders," Patricia ordered. "I want strike plans for all 3 targets simultaneously. We hit them everywhere at once. No warnings, no negotiations, no mercy." Lisa hesitated. "Admiral, the Chromath Empire has a mutual defense pact with the Velcros. If we strike first, we might be starting a war with half the galaxy." "We're not starting anything," Patricia said, her voice hard as titanium. "We're finishing what they began when they murdered our people. Get me a secure channel to President Anderson. It's time for Congress to make this official." The room emptied except for Kane, who lingered by the holographic display. "You know this changes everything, right? Once we cross this threshold, there's no going back. Humanity will be seen as aggressive, militant, better feared than extinct," Patricia replied. She'd spent 30 years in the Navy, rising through the ranks by being smart, strategic, and cautious. But caution had limits. Her grandson had been on the Horizon's Light traveling back from a school trip. He was 9 years old. The Velcros had shot him while he hid under a table. "How do you want to handle the declaration?" Kane asked. "I don't want speeches or grandstanding. I want a simple message sent to every government in the galaxy. Humanity hereby declares war on the Velcros Confederation and any power that supports them. Any ship, station, or settlement bearing Velcros colors or personnel is considered hostile. We will accept surrender. We will not accept excuses." Kane nodded slowly. "The politicians won't like the bluntness. The politicians can file complaints after we've eliminated the threat. Right now, I need warriors, not diplomats." Patricia pulled up the fleet deployment map, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. 40,000 personnel across 2 fleets. Against an enemy with 3 times that number. The odds weren't favorable, but odds had never stopped humanity before. Kirkham chimed. "Captain Ryan Cooper from the carrier Defiance. Admiral, permission to speak freely?" "Granted. The crew wants to know if this is really happening. If we're actually going to war." Patricia looked at the casualty reports one more time at the names of people who would never go home. "Tell your crew to check their weapons and say their prayers. We launch in 48 hours and we're not coming back until every Velcros warship is scrap metal and every raider who touched our people is dead. Is that clear enough?
Crystal clear, ma'am.
Defiance is ready. Good. Hayes out. She closed the channel and turned to Kane. Get me Captain Morrison from the Horizon's Light incident. I want him leading the ground assault on their forward base. He's earned the right to be there when we take it. Kane raised an eyebrow. He's a Marine commander, not special operations. He's a man who fought off 20 raiders with a fire team and saved 100 civilians. That's the kind of person I want when things go sideways. And things will go sideways, Victor. They always do. 48 hours. 2 days for the galaxy to prepare for a side of humanity they'd never seen before. 2 days for the Velcros to realize their mistake. 2 days before the shooting started and the dying began in earnest. Patricia had spent her career avoiding this moment, working for peace, building bridges between species, but bridges only worked when both sides wanted to cross. The Velcros had chosen to burn theirs. Now they would learn that humanity remembered every slight, every insult, every drop of innocent blood. And when pushed far enough, humans didn't just fight back, they fought to win, whatever the cost. The Velcro's Confederation Council chamber erupted in chaos as Ambassador Thren watched the human transmission. The holographic display showed Admiral Hayes' face, cold and determined, delivering humanity's declaration of war with clinical precision. No emotion, no theatrics, just facts and consequences. "This is a bluff," High Commander Vectis hissed, his mandibles clicking in agitation. Humans don't have the stomach for real war. They'll posture and threaten, then come begging for negotiations. Thren wasn't so sure. He'd spent 5 years on Earth as a diplomatic observer before the tensions began. He'd studied their history, their culture, their psychology. What he'd learned terrified him. But the Council had dismissed his warnings. They'd called him paranoid, infected by human propaganda. "I respectfully disagree," Thren said, rising from his seat. "I believe we have made a catastrophic error in judgment." Vectis's eye stalks swiveled toward him with contempt. "You've grown soft among the apes, Thren. They're a young species, barely 3 centuries into space travel. We've conquered systems while they were still burning fossil fuels on their homeworld, and yet they survived 2 global wars that killed hundreds of millions of their own people," Thren countered. "They split the atom and immediately used it as a weapon. They've built machines specifically designed to kill other machines. Their entire industrial capacity can convert to military production in months. We're not dealing with a peaceful species, Commander. We're dealing with a species that chose peace after mastering war." The Council chamber fell silent. Thren pressed his advantage, pulling up data on his personal display. Look at their military history. In their 20th century alone, they fought conflicts that consumed entire continents. They developed chemical weapons, biological agents, nuclear arsenals capable of destroying their own planet. They've only been peaceful because they decided to be, not because they lacked the capacity for violence. "Ancient history," another council member scoffed. "Their current generation has known nothing but prosperity and diplomacy." "Their current generation grew up on stories of those wars," Thren argued. "They romanticize their warriors. They build monuments to their soldiers. They teach their children about sacrifice and duty. War isn't alien to them. It's in their cultural DNA." Vectis slammed his appendage against the table. "Enough speculation. The facts are simple. We have superior numbers, superior technology, and superior positioning. Even if the humans are foolish enough to attack, we'll crush them and force a favorable treaty. This discussion is over." Thren sat down, knowing further argument was futile. The Council had made its decision based on pride and assumption. They'd looked at humanity's peaceful exterior and assumed weakness. They hadn't bothered to study what lay beneath that surface. They hadn't asked why a species capable of such violence had chosen restraint, and now they would pay for their ignorance. The transmission ended, and the Council began debating defensive strategies. Thren excused himself, making his way to his private quarters. Once there, he activated a secure communication channel to his family on the Velcros homeworld.
"Father?" His daughter's voice came through, concerned.
"What's wrong?" "Pack everything you can carry," Thren said quietly. "Take your mother and brother to the colony at Farpoint Station, the one near the border with Chromath Space. I don't understand. Why?" "Because in 3 days human warships are going to arrive in our home system, and I don't know if our defenses will hold. I've seen what they're capable of when they're patient and diplomatic. I don't want to see what they become when they're angry." His daughter's image flickered with confusion. "Everyone says the humans are bluffing, that they'll negotiate." "Everyone is wrong," Thren said firmly. "The humans have a saying, don't start a fight, but always finish one. We started this fight when we attacked their civilians. Now they're going to finish it, and I fear we're not prepared for what that means." He ended the transmission and pulled up his personal research files on human military doctrine. One document stood out, an analysis of something called the Doolittle Raid from their Second World War, a seemingly pointless attack on their enemy's capital city, strategically insignificant but psychologically devastating. It had proven that no target was safe, that distance provided no protection, that aggression would be met with retaliation no matter the cost. The humans had traded valuable resources and lives just to send a message. That's what terrified Thren. Humans didn't fight for territory or resources alone. They fought for principles, for revenge, for ideas. They would spend blood and treasure on battles that made no logical sense just to prove a point. And the point they were about to prove was that killing their children came with a price the Velcros couldn't afford to pay. His comm chimed, "High Commander Vectis, Ambassador Thren, report to the Military Planning Center. Your expertise on human psychology may prove useful after all." So they were starting to worry. Good. Maybe it wasn't too late to minimize the damage. Thren made his way through the Council Station's corridors, passing windows that looked out on the Velcros home fleet. 70 warships, pride of the Confederation, floating in formation around their primary shipyard. It looked impressive, overwhelming. He wondered how impressive it would look when human missiles started flying. Jake Morrison stood in the briefing room of the carrier Defiance, surrounded by 200 Marines who would be leading the assault on the Velcros forward operating base. The holographic display showed the target a fortified station orbiting Zeta Persei with enough firepower to hold off a small fleet. "Our job is simple," Captain Ellen Wright said, pointing to the station's docking rings. "We breach here, here, and here. 3 entry teams, simultaneous insertion. Speed and violence of action. We clear deck by deck until we reach the command center." A sergeant raised his hand. "Intel on enemy force strength? Estimated 2,000 Velcros troops, mixed regular and elite units." "They know we're coming. They've had 48 hours to prepare." Ellen paused, meeting the eyes of everyone in the room. "They think that's enough time. They're wrong?" Jake studied the tactical data. 2,000 versus 200. 10-1 odds. In any conventional analysis, this assault was suicide. But conventional analysis didn't account for human training, human equipment, or human determination. The Marines around him had spent years preparing for exactly this kind of operation. They drilled in zero gravity, practiced room clearing until it was instinctive, studied every piece of intelligence on Velcros tactics and physiology. "Rules of engagement?" someone asked. Ellen's expression hardened. "Any Velcros in uniform is hostile. Any civilian who surrenders will be detained but unharmed. Any target that threatens you or your team is authorized for immediate termination. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to eliminate their forward base and send a message that human space is off limits." The briefing continued with detailed assignments. Jake's team would take the port docking ring, the most heavily defended section. It made sense. He'd proven himself on the Horizon's light. Command wanted him where the fighting would be hardest. He didn't mind. He wanted to be there. He needed to be there. After the briefing, Jake returned to his quarters and pulled out a small photograph. His sister Karen and her family. They'd been on the Horizon's light, traveling to visit him before his deployment. Karen had survived because Jake reached the cargo bay in time. Her husband and 2 kids hadn't been as lucky. The Velcros had shot them in the first 5 minutes of the raid, before Jake even knew the ship was under attack. A knock on the door. Amy Chen entered without waiting for permission. She'd been his second for 3 years, fought beside him on a dozen operations. She knew him well enough to recognize the look on his face. "You good?" she asked. "I'm operational," Jake replied, which wasn't the same thing. "We're going to make them pay for what they did. Payment doesn't bring anyone back," Jake said quietly. He put the photo away and checked his rifle for the 100th time, but it might stop them from doing it again. Amy sat down across from him. "You know the odds on this assault. Command is sending us into a meat grinder. The odds were worse on the horizon's light. We made it work." That was defensive. This is offensive. We're attacking a fortified position with limited support and no retreat option. If the fleet can't maintain air superiority, we'll be trapped on that station, with no extraction. Jake looked at her directly. "You having second thoughts?" "No," Amy said immediately. "I'm ready to go. I just wanted to make sure you were doing this for the right reasons. Revenge is a bad motivation for combat operations." "This isn't revenge," Jake said, standing up. "Revenge is personal. This is justice. This is making sure every species in the galaxy understands that you can't murder humans without consequences. The Velcros think we're soft because we've been peaceful. We're about to educate them." The ship's intercom crackled to life. "All assault teams to drop pods. Launch in 30 minutes. Jake grabbed his gear, the familiar weight of armor and weapons settling over him like a second skin. Around the ship, 200 other Marines were doing the same. 200 volunteers who knew the odds and accepted them anyway. That's what the Velcros didn't understand about humans. They thought numbers and technology decided battles. They'd never encountered a species that fought hardest when the odds were worst. The drop pod bay was controlled chaos. Marines checking equipment, medics distributing stim packs, engineers testing breach charges. Jake strapped into his pod, feeling the familiar pre-combat tension. The fear was there, it always was, but he'd learned to use it. Fear kept you sharp, kept you alert. It was the thing that kept you alive when everything went wrong. "Team leaders, sound off." Captain Wright's voice came through the comm. "Alpha team ready? Bravo team ready? Charlie team ready?" Jake keyed his mic. "Delta team ready." "Good hunting," Wright said. "Remember what we're fighting for. Remember who we lost. Make every shot count." The carrier's engines thrummed as it accelerated toward the Velcro station. Through the pod's small viewport, Jake could see other ships in the fleet, destroyers and cruisers forming a protective screen around the carrier. Somewhere out there, Velcro ships were scrambling to intercept. Naval crews were preparing to trade missiles and energy weapons to die in the black so the Marines could reach their target. The pod shuddered as the launch sequence initiated. Jake closed his eyes, thinking about Karen's kids, about the families on all those colony ships, about every human who died because the Velcros thought they could take what they wanted without consequences. He thought about the message they were about to send, written in fire and steel across the galaxy. Humanity had tried peace. The Velcros had rejected it. Now they would learn what came after peace. They would learn that the species which had once nearly destroyed itself in global war hadn't forgotten how to fight. They'd just been waiting for a reason. The launch light turned green. Jake's pod shot into space, one of 200 small projectiles hurtling toward the enemy station at terminal velocity. The assault had begun, and there was no turning back now. The Velcro station commander watched his tactical display with growing alarm as human drop pods streaked through the defensive fire. His gunners were hitting targets, destroying pods before they could breach the hull, but too many were getting through. The humans were using erratic flight patterns, jamming his targeting systems, sacrificing some pods as decoys while others punched through weak points in his defense grid. "Breaches on decks 7, 12, and 19, his tactical officer reported. "Human forces are inside the station." "Seal those sections," the commander ordered. "Deploy all reserve units. We outnumber them 10 to 1. crush them, but the humans didn't fight like any species the commander had encountered before. They moved through his station like they owned it, clearing rooms with brutal efficiency. His troops had defensive positions, superior numbers, knowledge of the terrain. The humans had momentum and fury. In the first 10 minutes, they killed 100 Velcro soldiers and advanced 3 decks deeper into the station. Jake's pod hit the station's hull like a meteor, the impact jarring every bone in his body despite the crash harness. The shaped charge blew inward, creating an entry point into a cargo bay. Jake unbuckled and rolled out, rifle up, scanning for targets. 3 Velcro soldiers caught by surprise. Jake dropped them before they could raise their weapons. His team poured through the breach behind him, taking positions, securing the entry point. "Delta team inside," Jake reported. Proceeding to objective, the station's interior was all sharp angles and dim lighting, designed for Velcro's physiology. Jake's helmet display highlighted friendly markers, showing the other team's positions. Alpha and Bravo had made entry successfully. Charlie team's signal was weak. They'd taken casualties. "Move," Jake ordered, leading his team toward the central command deck. They encountered resistance at every junction. Velcro's troops firing from cover, trying to slow the advance. But slowing down wasn't in the playbook. Jake's team used flashbangs and grenades to clear obstacles, moving through the station like a force of nature. They reached a major intersection and ran into heavy resistance. 20 Velcro's troops with crew-served weapons, a kill zone designed to stop any assault. Jake's team took cover as energy bolts scorched the bulkheads around them. "We're pinned," Amy said, ducking as another volley passed overhead. Jake studied the tactical display. They couldn't go forward through that fire. Going around would take too long, give the enemy time to reinforce. But there was a third option, one that required trusting in human engineering and a healthy disregard for safety protocols. "Breach charges on the floor," Jake ordered. "We're going down." His team placed the charges while providing covering fire. The explosion tore through the deck plating, creating a hole into the level below. Jake dropped through before the smoke cleared, landing in what looked like a barracks. Velcro's soldiers scrambled for weapons. Jake's team descended like avenging angels, clearing the room in seconds. "This way," Jake said, orienting himself using his helmet's tactical map. They were one level below the command deck now, directly underneath their objective. Another breach charge on the ceiling, another violent entry. They came up behind the Velcro's defensive position, catching them completely by surprise. The firefight was short and brutal. The Velcros never had a chance. Jake's team swept through, leaving no survivors among the combatants. When the smoke cleared, they held the central junction, the gateway to the command deck. "All teams converge on command," Captain Wright ordered. "We end this now." Jake watched his display as the other teams fought their way toward his position. They'd lost 30 Marines in the assault, 30 good people who would never go home. But they'd eliminated 500 Velcro's troops and taken control of critical sections of the station. The enemy was reeling, falling back toward their final defensive positions. "Delta Team, you're closest to command," Wright said. "Breach and secure. We'll reinforce as soon as we reach your position." Jake looked at his team. 15 Marines, exhausted, low on ammunition, but still ready. You heard the captain. "Let's finish this." The command deck doors were reinforced, designed to withstand ship-to-ship weapons. Jake's breaching charges wouldn't cut it. But humans had anticipated that. Every Marine carried a special package for exactly this scenario. Plasma cutters, military grade, hot enough to slice through any material given time. "We need 2 minutes, Amy said, starting to cut through the door. "You've got 90 seconds, Jake replied, watching his motion tracker. Enemy forces were regrouping, preparing a counterattack. They'd figured out that the humans were going for the command center, and they were throwing everything they had left at this position. The first wave hit from 3 directions simultaneously. Jake's team formed a defensive perimeter, pouring fire into the advancing Velcro's troops. The aliens fought with desperate courage, knowing their station was falling. They pressed forward despite casualties, trying to break through to stop the breach. Jake's rifle clicked empty. He drew his sidearm, still firing, still holding the line. A Velcross warrior made it through, its blade raised. Jake parried with his empty rifle, then shot the alien point blank. Another rushed him. Jake met it with his combat knife. Muscle memory taking over where conscious thought failed. "Doors open!" Amy shouted. Jake's team fell back through the breach, entering the command deck. The Velcro's commander stood at the central console, surrounded by his remaining bridge crew. He raised his weapon, mandibles clicking in what might have been a challenge or a prayer. Jake didn't give him time to find out which. The firefight was over in seconds. The command deck fell silent except for the alarms and the heavy breathing of exhausted Marines. "Command deck secure," Jake reported. "Station is ours." Through the viewport, he could see the rest of the battle unfolding. Human destroyers engaging Velcro's cruisers. Missiles crossing the dark. Ships dying in flowers of flame. The naval battle was still in doubt, but the station was finished. The Velcro's forward operating base, their anchor point for raids into human space, had fallen in less than 2 hours. Captain Wright's voice came through triumphant and grim. "Well done, Delta Team. Secure all intelligence data and prepare for evacuation. The fleet's taking heavy fire. We need to extract now." Jake moved to the command console, downloading everything he could find. Battle plans, communication logs, intelligence on other Velcro's positions. This data would be invaluable for the next phase of the war, because this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. As his team prepared for extraction, Jake looked out at the dying ships and thought about what this meant. Humanity had crossed its own line today. They'd proven they could fight, that they would fight, that peaceful didn't mean helpless. The galaxy was watching, taking notes, recalculating their assumptions about Earth and its people. Some would see this as aggression, as humans becoming the monsters they claimed to fight. Others would see it as justice, as necessary response to an unforgivable crime. Jake didn't care what they thought. He cared about the families who would sleep safely tonight because 200 Marines had shown the predators that humans had teeth. The dropships arrived, evac pods docking with the station under covering fire from the fleet. Jake's team made their way to the extraction point, carrying their wounded, leaving their dead for later recovery. 30 Marines had fallen, taking this station. Their sacrifice had bought something precious, a message to every species in the galaxy. A line drawn in stars and steel. "Touch our people, and we will come for you. No matter the distance. No matter the cost, we will find you and we will make you pay." As the dropship accelerated away from the dying station, Jake allowed himself one moment of satisfaction. They'd done what needed doing. The Velcros had learned their lesson. But he knew this was far from over. This was one battle in what would be a long war. A war humanity hadn't wanted but would fight until it was finished. Because that's what humans did. They survived, they adapted, they overcame, and when pushed far enough, they reminded the universe why apex predators existed, not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they absolutely refused to quit no matter what the odds said about their chances.